So, is motivation a lie? Nowadays, it's so common to see people complaining about not having any motivation, being unable to start, and not being able to push through when things get difficult. There's no persistence, there's no grit, no passion. And I'll be honest, I can definitely relate, and I think I told this story a number of times, but I used to pack an extra 25 kilos. I was extremely lazy, and well, let's just say I was used to eating pint after pint of ice cream. But recently, something very interesting is happening with me. I'm facing a new interesting problem. I never want to stop. So before it was clear that I didn't have any motivation whatsoever and I was constantly looking for comfort. But now I learned how rewarding it is to constantly push yourself. And I feel a bit weird saying that, but I've experienced a mind shift I thought was completely crazy and insane. I learned to enjoy doing hard things. So think about that. It's weird to think that doing something hard can be as pleasurable, if not more, to just be comfortable and eating your favorite foods and watching Netflix and just chilling. But yeah, I've learned to find pleasure in overcoming challenges, in doing the things I don't want to do. And again, I've learned how rewarding it is to have the grit to push past your fears and have this persistence and discipline. And most importantly, I've learned the joys of mastering a craft because this gives you meaning and purpose in life. So I've accomplished more in the past 2 years than I did my whole life, and it honestly feels a bit surreal. And as I mentioned, it wasn't always like this. And now that I finished a 3 year project, I can take a step back and reflect how I got here. And by the way, this 3 year project is my book Piscis, Demystifying Jungian Psychology. And I'll send you a sample of the book when you join my newsletter down below. And if you like it, you can also get the paperback on Amazon to learn more about the shadow integration process and basically the whole shebang about Carl Jung. So the first thing I find important to explore is precisely motivation, because I often see people hoping that one day they will just wake up feeling energized and completely ready to change. But I must tell you that this is nothing more than a childish desire, because there is the expectation that things will magically happen, effortlessly, without you lifting a finger. And yeah, it would be nice if things were like that, but unfortunately, they're not. And yeah, I used to think like that too, but I learned that this constant search for comfort is the biggest sign of a negative mother complex. So, in other words, you are identified with what Carl Jung calls the puer aeternus or the puella aeterna, also known as the man child or the woman child. So people identified with this archetype are constantly avoiding responsibility and they also believe everything is harder for them. And that's why they're constantly looking for the easy way out and never fully commit to anything. And they love to find new excuses such as, well, I just don't have any motivation to change. Everything so they don't have to fully grow up and take responsibility for their lives. But I'm not here to shame anyone, and I already have plenty of videos on the Poor Eternus in this channel. Today I want to explain how motivation truly works. So first of all, you have to understand that you have to meet motivation halfway. Also, motivation loves movement, and movement begets movement. Always remember that. Movement begets movement. So, do you know when you really don't want to work out, but somehow you force yourself to go anyways, and in the middle of the training session, you suddenly feel this surge of energy, and you really get into it, and you start enjoying the workout, and you don't want to stop? Or let's say, I experienced this a lot with recording these videos. Some days I just don't want to do it, but I show up anyway, and a few minutes, and a few minutes in, I just find myself enjoying this thing. Or when I don't want to sit down to write, but I do it anyway, and in the middle of the session, I'm just flowing. And this feeling is exactly the flow state. So just had to push through this initial hurdle because, well, flow is on the other side. And now I even I expect and I even chase this initial hurdle because, again, I know I will be rewarded with flow. And the biggest benefit of flow is that the activity itself is rewarding. It's something Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who first described this state and named the flow state, calls autotelic. So, in other words, you unlock intrinsic motivation and you learn to do things of your own volition rather than any form of external pressure. But again, for flow to occur, the activity has to present some form of challenge. And that's why comfort is the biggest enemy of flow and consequently motivation. So, to experience flow, there needs to be balance between the challenges and our skills. So, in other words, we have to push ourselves just a little bit more every day. And why would you do that? Because the greater your skills, the more flow you experience. And over time, a powerful switch occurs. We stop looking for passive forms of pleasure like adult videos, drinking, and eating, and now we start craving more active forms of pleasure, such as overcoming challenges, creative endeavors, pushing ourselves physically, and also mastering a craft. And I know this may sound insane, but when you experience flow during these activities, there is nothing like it, especially because you have the sense that knowing that you've earned it. And can I be honest with you? You will never get this feeling with passive forms of pleasure because they always come at a huge cost. You destroy your health, your mind deteriorates, your relationships suffer, and you are set for a mediocre life. But it's more than that because you are in this constant inner turmoil and secretly ashamed of your actions. And I understood that this shame is there for a good reason because it's your soul telling you that you can do more. It's your soul trying to wake you the fuck up and steer you in the right direction. So I just realized that I'm slightly more intense than the usual today. But I honestly think that life means more when you're giving all you've got. And that's why I also believe that you must give yourself no other choice but to go all in. And if your life's comfortable, you have to create conditions that demand growth. Because you only feel truly alive when you have skin in the game. But again, that demands real action. So here's what I mean, and I've told this story a few times already, but when I was extremely anxious, depressed, and my life had virtually no meaning, that's when I decided to move from the south of Brazil, my home country, all the way to Dublin, Ireland. And I didn't know everything I'm sharing with you today, but I decided to listen to that voice. My soul was trying to communicate with me, telling me that, well, man, you have to do something. Your life can't be just that. So that's what I did. I put myself in a new environment that basically gave me no other choice but to learn a new language, make new friends, and also find work as soon as possible. And when you are identified with the poor eternus, that's exactly what you need to do. Take radical responsibility for your life. Stop living in your head and take practical actions in the real world. Remember, movement begets movement. And once you have momentum, it's important to create a vision. And before we move on to the final part, let me quickly tell you that you can find a step-by-step to conquer the poor and proletarians and my system to overcome procrastination and unlock motivation in my accessible course Catabasis The Shadow Integration Manual. And if you'd like to work one-on-one with me, I also invite you to check my mentorship. Links down below. So now let's discuss the vision factor. Don't try to get away from the sun here. But another common problem is only taking action when there is some form of external pressure. So be it from a partner, a boss, or a deadline. And this is yet another sign of an unresolved mother and father complex because they're being projected on these authority figures and you don't move by yourself. And that's why you have to learn that values drive action. So, in other words, you must attach all of your choices to a bigger picture. You have to deeply understand your why and what makes, your life worth living. And of course, this will probably take some experimentation, but once you figure that out and what makes you feel at your best, you must double down on that. So I'm just listening to Stephen Kotler's book In Our Country, in which he explores how he enters into flow, what are, how he thinks, how he plans, and what are the actions he takes on a daily basis to reach the flow state. And he's also narrating an experiment because he wants to become basically a pro athlete at the age of 52. So he wants to become extremely good at skiing because apparently this always took a backseat in his life. And, it feels like time is passing by and it's something he really wants to accomplish. And why is that? He basically says that this is the moment he feels at his best on the entire planet. So if there is one thing that makes him feel, I don't know, he just can't compare the feeling of skiing with anything else. So this is his highest value and his highest priority. And once you know that, again, it's easy to say no and place boundaries. Because one of the biggest problems of someone identified with the poor is that they're in love with the realm of possibilities, and so they never accomplish anything real. Because to accomplish something, you had to narrow down, you had to say no, you had to make a choice. And you have to understand that we can't have everything we want in life, because some things are just entirely opposite from one another. Especially if you desire to master a craft, you probably just have one shot in your life. And recently, I had to make a few tough decisions about my lifestyle. Because since I was young, I had this dream of traveling, being a digital nomad, hopping from place to place, working remotely. And so I did it. My wife and I are in this very moment traveling through a few cities in Argentina. We were in Buenos Aires, then we went to Cordoba, Mendoza, and now we are in Salta. And I thought that if we stayed at least 1 month in each place, it would be enough, to settle in, get the routine down, be productive, and do all of the things I want to do, basically. Because my highest priorities, are my creativity in music, mastering my craft here, recording the videos, writing, and, really building something here, because this is when I feel at my best, when I'm delivering these messages, when I'm writing, and when I'm being creative. And obviously making time for my wife and I to enjoy life, basically. So knowing that also made me realize that this lifestyle is absolutely incompatible with that, because when you're traveling and hopping from place to place, you can't fully relax because you're constantly you're constantly worried about finding a new gym, finding a new supermarket, so getting to know the surroundings. And when you get to the Airbnb, usually the kitchen utensils are terrible, so you can't eat that healthy, and you find yourself spending more money ordering food. so it's like it's a bunch of things I didn't know, basically. I just didn't know, okay? But I'm glad I had this experience because it also showed me what I truly value in this life. And I realized that I don't have to be hopping from place to place, because it's not the thing that make me truly happy. Yes, we will be traveling more. Yes, we'll be taking more trips, but this lifestyle is not for me. And now that I know that, and I also understand my values and my why, what makes me feel, truly alive, what gives me meaning, it's easy to make these decisions. It's easy to shape and design my life around that. And lastly, I'm very aware of my mortality. And that's also why I know that I can't rely on motivation to do things. Yes, experiencing flow brings immense levels of motivation, and I honestly think it's better than drugs. But adults also have to learn to do things regardless of how they feel. And you might be think that, oh, you're promoting hustle culture, oh, you have to be stoic no matter what. It's not about that. No, I always make time to understand my emotions, my feelings, and I give myself time off when it's necessary, and I also have my hobbies. Again, this is about being truthful to your vision. And I'm not doing this to impress anyone. Being the absolute best I can be is a commitment I made to myself. And to reach this point, I always have to remember that values drive action. Be truthful to your vision and shape your life around that. Yes, I'll admit that sometimes I push past my limits, especially on this book launch. But I'll be honest, I'd much rather learn how to find a sustainable growth and that's exactly what I'm working on at the moment, than feeling anxious and depressed because deep down I know I'm wasting my life. Well, these are my honest thoughts on living more meaningfully. And if you want to learn more about how to conquer the poor and proletarians, you should check these videos over here.